All right, we are here today with Jules Suzdaltsev. I can't believe I nailed that on the first
Nailed
try.
it.
I didn't even try beforehand. I'm gonna have him on right now. He has contributed to the Young Turks and Vice and a number of different outlets. You might recognize his latest string of tweets that went viral when a group of children at their junior high school prom threw up the Roman salute. And without further ado, here is Jules. What's going on, Jules?
Hey man, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, I've been meaning to have as many people on from our little group chat as possible,
Yeah.
and yeah, this was a pretty solid opportunity. I'll probably have you on the live show as well, but
And,
I mean, let's just get right into it. You got information, or someone sent you a photo of a group of Wisconsin high schoolers posing last spring in an apparent Nazi salute. Can you just like kind of walk us through what happened there?
yeah, I mean that's exactly it. A former student sent me a DM and said like, "Hey, can you get some eyes on this? These kids like posted this like group Nazi salute photo with the caption. I think it was something like, 'We even got the black kid to do it.' School pride, something like that." And I was like I grew up in California, and like the idea of anybody doing a Nazi salute on camera, much less like a group of kids at a prom photo, is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. So I like put it out and I was like, hey, does anybody know why? Like, is there any other explanation other than like there's a Nazi town in the middle of Wisconsin? And a ton of students and stuff reached out and were like, oh yeah, that's not surprising at all. Like that school is like super racist, super homophobic, transphobic, and the administration like doesn't do anything. And like I said, like former students, current students, and I was like, and I started like publishing like stories people were sending me about that school, and it went like I posted it at it was like 3 a.m. and I had to shoot a pilot in the morning, so I was like, all right, I'm just gonna post this and go to sleep. And I woke up and I was like, oh, this is like on the news. This is like there are reporters driving to this town to like talk to kids and the administration's in like massive cover your ass territory. I was like, oh well, that was a lot of people feel the same way I do about a a bunch of kids doing Nazi salutes.
Um, so what do you think this is? I mean, is this like honestly, is this like widespread mobilization of the alt right, or is it just simply like children memeing or doing it for the memes or thinking that they're being edgy, like realistically speaking?
I think it's kind of a mix. I mean, it sounds like I mean it's Wisconsin, which is like I think like nationally, it's pretty half and half. I kind of looked it up for the election, but it was like half Trump, half Hillary. But what I think this is it's like it's that thing where like the edginess ramps up when you live in a community that is already kind of racist. So like like casual racism is just normal, so it's not edgy anymore. So people do stuff the comments I was getting was like, oh yeah, people like shout white power and do Nazi salutes and like I I would say it's sort of that cross between like the edginess of the alt right meets like, yeah, a lot of these kids probably think like white is all right and white people are better than non-white people, and they're kind of maybe too young to realize that like, hey, you definitely shouldn't publish like a prom photo of you doing a Nazi salute. But I also wouldn't say that like I don't think these kids like want to kill Jews. I don't think most of them, and like most of the kids didn't do it or did like kind of a variation of it. So yeah, I don't think there's like a hardcore Nazi town in Wisconsin, but I do think like um, the fact that it was kind of so brazen speaks more to the community itself, probably being more like casually accepting of racism and anti-Semitism and stuff like that.
Yeah, and obviously, like, there's levels of acceptability. Not that any kind of racism is acceptable, but there's levels of acceptability in U.S. society from what we've seen. I often talk about the boundary that you can't cross. Like, for example, Roseanne crossed the boundary when she called a black Persian woman, an ape,
Yeah.
basically. And that's like understood by even all of the racists that like, oh no, you fucked up. That's that you crossed the line, so you're going to get punished for it. Versus the kind of acceptable racism is what Ben Shapiro does literally for a living,
Yeah.
where he will actively dehumanize people, dehumanize marginalized groups in an effort to, I don't know. I mean, I guess in an effort to appease to the racists, or at least make them feel like their opinions are not incorrect, that they're actually smart for having these positions, and that those positions are not rooted within feelings, but actually within facts. Oftentimes, it's not the case. But these kids, these kids are growing up in a media environment where their parents are, or these kids are growing up in an environment where their parents are probably like regular old American
Yeah.
heartland racists who are like, I don't like the fact that I can't say the N word anymore, and also racial displacement is happening. America is browning out. It's not an America I recognize anymore, and they're worried. And then their children are probably because of that, and because of like the prevailing liberal cultural hegemony that they grew up in, where like all figures of authority are telling them like diversity is good, and like you should just kind of um, like agree with us from this perspective, and they should agree with that. They kind of grow increasingly agitated at that like what they perceive as like social justice warrior
Totally.
BS, and this
And like
is this is
rebelling
one
against
way to like rebel
responsibility.
against that, I guess.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
totally. Somebody tweeted at me a pretty salient point, which was that like um, we talk about like us, especially like liberal left coast or liberal coastal elites. We think of racism as kind of like having taken a massive step back in the last like few decades. But yeah, somebody said this to me that like really what's happened is that we've promoted this idea that like being outwardly racist is really impolite, and that's sort of where that's probably like the lowest common denominator of racism in America is that like, hey, this will make people feel bad. Not necessarily that this is like overtly wrong, and that like this sort of like like being racist as part of your identity or part of your thought process is like hurtful to society. I don't think that like obviously that's promoted, but that's not again like the lowest common denominator of how racism is perceived outside of like New York and LA. So especially now when there's this massive trend of like, well, you should never be polite to anyone because that's being politically correct. Suddenly, that like veil of like the last like 20 years of hey, you should be polite about racism is now just like, hey, feel free to feel free to go as far as you want without it being like without it like you said crossing a line. And for a lot of these kids, crossing that line is the edginess. It's them rebelling against authority. It's like vulnerable kids finding solace in like the online alt right, which is its own that's sort of its own social structure, and it's like kind of like a social problem. But it sort of makes sense. Like it's ultimately not surprising, especially like somewhere like Wisconsin or like in the Midwest or in the South in general, that we don't really have a lot of access to when we talk about racism.
Yeah. Um, so ultimately, though, the last thing I wanted to ask is there were some other instances that where kids like sent you information about the school not really doing anything about it. I don't know what could be done, but one of the things I wanted to ask you is what's your perspective? You've gotten. Can you give us some examples of like people that have replied to you with like personal anecdotes or experiences that they've had, like anything that really stood out for you? And
Absolutely.
is it beyond just like regular children being bullies with some additional racism peppered on top of that?
I mean, for sure. And I know what you mean by like children being bullies, because that was my first thought is, I was in high school and people would bully each other about like everything. And in this case, it did seem like a lot of the comments I'd gotten and like a lot of the stories I posted did have this unifying theme of like intentionally trying to target kids based on like race or ethnicity. And again, I think that that reflects the casualness with which that community probably treats that topic. You know, I think maybe like instead of off the top of my head, like something like I don't know, making fun of a kid for being poor or like short or something like that. Like, you know, racism seems to have this much stronger effect, especially in communities where it's not addressed. And that was the overall theme from these messages. That's what stood out. Like people were saying, like, kids would make posts on social media about other kids, like calling them the N word or like making fun of them for not supporting Trump. There was one story where like kids were yelling "white power" in the school hallway. Somebody scratched the N word into a mirror. Um, like a lot of like kids who are non-white, so that they were just directly like made fun of with like racial slurs. Like one specific one, I think she was Native American, and she said that they used a essentially a slur against Native American women at her repeatedly, and all of them basically said that when they went to the administration either brushed it off or sometimes defended it. One story said something to the effect of, there was a like a very racist, like anti Black Lives Matter like discussion going on, and she was offended by it, and she went to an administrator, and the administrator said, well, it's their, you know, it's their First Amendment right, and look at what Black Lives Matter is doing to the police. And I think that like when an
Yeah.
administration sort of defends that kind of thing, it definitely emboldens kids, because it's kind of like, oh well, maybe I can't pick on him for this, but I know I can pick on him for this, and nothing will really happen because like, you know, the teachers or the principal or whoever is refusing to address this, they'll they'll practically back me up, or at worst, I'll just be able to get away with it and keep doing it, or I'll get a slap on the wrist, and the ultimate result is the person I wanted to hurt got hurt, and I didn't.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to read is the excerpt that you put up from the photographer's page, because you found this. This is like publicly available, or
Yeah.
was publicly available until recently. The high resolution photo, and some accounts claim that the photographer told them to throw up the sign. The photographer who is now claiming that it was just waving. Even though originally, like, there are multiple people that were photographed inside of that photo that said no, the photographer asked us to throw up the Sig Heil, basically, including the one kid who was all the way on the right who didn't.
Yeah.
His account of the story is drastically different than what the photographer was talking about. But this goes right alongside your point where you said like the adults in the room are also propping up this sort of behavior or allowing this behavior to continue, and not necessarily addressing the more damaging outcomes of this sort of behavior, or these sort of opinions turning into like genuine ideology or growing into a political movement. And even the photographer said, after taking down the page, due to malevolent behavior on part of some in society, this page has been modified. It's really hard to read, by the way. I don't know,
Yeah,
like
it's
this
not.
person like did a really poor job of writing it, but it is too bad that there are those in society who can and do take the time to be jerks, knowingly and willingly to be jerks. The internet can be a wonderful tool, but for some, there's an overwhelming urge to destroy. The destruction may not be physical, but instead, it can be bullying that is intellectual or emotional. To anyone that was hurt, I sincerely apologize. To those who have harmed them, we as society often ignore them. I have chosen not to do that. You are jerks. Grow up. Be kind. Be gentle. Now, I think this is saying that this is the ultimate, like, well, one, this is the ultimate we live in a society post,
Yeah.
and two, it's hilarious because this is like um, completely not taking into account like millions of people that were affected by the Holocaust, for example, or their feelings, and hyper focusing on the feelings of the kids throwing up the Roman salute, which is
Right.
ironic because this person is acknowledging that like there are different levels of destruction. It could be it doesn't always have to be physical. It could be bullying and it could be harmful. Well, what the fuck were you guys doing there? You know what I mean? Um,
He's so close to it, but it's all about like I mean, it just sounds like a like rebuking the media for like being mad about like, oh, why are you mad that I put up a photo of like a huge group of kids doing a Nazi salute? Like, but you know, it's a really confusing it's a confusing message, and it also it literally like half of it reads like you know I don't agree with them doing this, but you shouldn't attack them for doing it, and you're all jerks. It's
Yeah.
just it's super weird.
No, it's white identity politics to the maximum. I feel like where white fragility is of the utmost importance, and like no historical references are needed for how violent or how damaging this ideology is when it has grown in the past and turned into a widespread political movement, as it is kind of happening right now with the international white nationalist movement right now. So let's not consider that. Let's not consider the other side. Let's not consider the victims. The true victims are the children whose feelings are being hurt by people who are asking them questions like, why did you throw up the Roman salute? Like, why are you sig heiling for your junior prom pick? And then why did you celebrate the fact that you even got the black kid to do it?
Yeah,
So you know those are the real villains, the ones asking the questions, not the ones throwing up the Nazi salute, which is 4chan essentially in real life. Great. Well,
yeah.
Jules, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. Give us your social media and all your plugs
Just
before
hit me up on Twitter, at Jules_SU. And I'll try to like anytime I see photos of a large group of kids doing a Nazi salute, I'll probably post it.
Oh Jesus. Okay. Well, that's gonna be scary for your future, but
Yeah.
all
So
right.
far, yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for coming, man.
All right.